Alright, so that was the story of the Burghers of Calais. But the thing that makes a sculpture so remarkable is the fact that it challenges a lot of preconceived notions about sculpture. One of them is that all of the figures in a sculpture are to be unifying the composition as a whole. This work doesn't do that. The other one is that the figures should be idealized and therefore not necessarily naturalistic. This doesn't do that. The third thing is that it's really hard for people to pay attention to sculptures when they're on top of these enormous pedestals, and, well, this one's not on top of an enormous pedestal. This sits on the ground. These figures are all slightly larger than life size, but not that much larger so that you feel that they're grand in any sense. And lastly, all of these men are just ambling in this very tight sculptural group. They're all looking in different directions. Here this person's bending this way, this one with his furrowed brow, this man is looking down. Here you have the keys that they're carrying. They're wearing rags. The Burghers would have been the leaders of the city, and so as part of the humiliation of the military defeat and the presentation ceremony that they're going through is that they have to wear rags. But this is the other thing that Rodin did, and that's why he is regarded as an impressionist sculptor. Look at the way that this figure's head is modeled, or the way that it's built. This is a bronze cast of a clay sculpture. Rodin would have made a clay maquette or a smaller version of this in clay, and then the foundry that he worked with in Paris would have increased the scale and cast the thing in bronze. But he deliberately, in all of his sculptures, let them appear as though they were made by someone's hand. In the same way that the painters wanted to have a painting be about a painting, here we have a sculptor who wants his work to be about sculpture, about the actual verb to sculpt, just like the paintings are about the verb to paint. That is Auguste Rodin, and he is, as I said, pretty much the only sculptor of this period. Alright, so the big influences on this Impressionist group were locomotion, the fact that they could move things, trains, cinema, all of these things. Daily life, they were really interested in this real world and capturing the real world. They were also very interested in the changing social roles of society. Nothing says locomotion more specifically than this photo series by Edward Muybridge. If you look down in the bottom left-hand corner, you can see that all of these images are numbered. Edward Muybridge was the first photographer, the first person to capture the image of a horse in motion. Now, look really closely at the way that these horses back here are running. Their legs are spread both forward and backward, and they're gliding across the landscape. They look like a rocking horse. That's not how horses run, but if you just are standing by the side watching a horse run by very quickly, you're not going to see that this is actually how they run. There is a moment when all 4 feet come off the ground, but at that moment they're not splayed front and back, they're tucked underneath of the belly of the beast. This happened in 1872 in Palo Alto, California, but like I think faster than pretty much any other image, this series spread throughout the world. So, here we have 1872, that same year, incorrect. By, I would say, 1880, you will not see a painter make a depiction of a horse running in this way unless they're trying very deliberately to say something about this kind of misinformation. So, locomotion, huge deal. The other huge deal, as I said, with locomotion wasn't just capturing actual movement, it was also the infrastructure of locomotion. Claude Monet painted dozens of train stations in Paris, or rather, he painted a few train stations in Paris dozens and dozens of times. Here is Gare Saint-Lazare, which is basically the train station of Saint-Lazare, from 1877. This, like his other works that we've seen, is about the capturing of light, the speed in which everything is happening, and also that staccato brushwork. All of this is embodied in this one picture. Another aspect of locomotion is the fact that instead of being urban dwellers, meaning that you were never to leave the city because you lived in the city and you were effectively trapped there, these trains allowed people that lived in the city access to what we would refer to today as suburbs, but what they would refer to were smaller towns that existed at the end of these train tracks. Now, the train tracks were not put in to take tourists out to these lovely situations. The train tracks were put in place so that industry that was happening at these distant locations could more easily interact with the industry in downtown Paris. So if you look at the background of this painting, you can see a smokestack. Argenteuil, where this painting was made, but also what it is about, was a factory town. But it also had this lovely waterway, and so a lot of tourists from Paris wanted to go to Argenteuil so they could have a nice day out in the country. That idea of a day out in the country, which urbanites throughout the world yearn for. I mean, I know that a lot of my students with Southern Maine Community College have very kind of lives that are both urban and country, or maybe a little bit more or less urban, whatever. But this, however, was brand spanking new. This was the first time that they were able to do this, and this was a big deal. And so the painters were going out there with them. Pretty much every Impressionist painter made a scene in Argenteuil, and pretty much every Impressionist painter made some sort of painting that indicated that locomotion, the change in the way that we interact with our geography, was changing not only art, but also how we and they interacted with their world. Oops, excuse me, skipped over that. Changing social roles. One of the biggest social roles, or the biggest change in social roles, was the role of women. Women were allowed to do things that they weren't allowed to do before. They were allowed to go out to lunch. They were allowed to go out to the opera with just one chauffeur, or one chaperone, as opposed to going specifically with a male date. And here we have a painting by a female artist, also something that's fairly revolutionary. Woman in the loge with a pearl necklace. Here we have a young woman. She's probably only about 18, and she has gotten all dressed up to come to see the opera. And the loge is a part of an opera house. It's basically the balcony, or the mezzanine. And she is in her little box, and she is at the opera. However, the one interesting thing about this painting, and you can probably see it, is that there's this kind of bizarre reflection happening behind her. We don't quite know if this is an image that Mary Cassatt made of a friend hoping to go to the opera and getting all dressed up and sitting for this portrait, or if this is part of the architecture, that she is actually seated against a large mirror that gives us a reflection of this full cavernous space of the opera house. Mary Cassatt is a very, very interesting artist. That is why she is the choice for the video that you are to watch accompanying this week's lecture. You're going to look at a lot of her pictures, but this is the one that I would really like for you to focus on and think about in relation to that film, but also in relation to her being a female painter in what has since been a list of Berthe Morisot is probably the only female artist that Will Gompertz lists by name in chapter 3 of the book. Mary Cassatt doesn't really get much of a mention. I don't really know why, but whatever. Berthe Morisot was the sister-in-law of Edouard Manet. She knew him very well. They were not only family, they were also friends. They showed together. Both Mary Cassatt and Berthe Morisot had works that were previously shown in the Academy's Salon exhibition, as did all of the Impressionists. Gompertz likes to think that the Impressionists had this rupture with the Academy and they would never show again with the Academy, but the fact of the matter is you sold work in the Academy, in these Salon shows. And so all of the artists that I've shown you today, all of the artists that he mentions, I think the only different discrepancy is I don't talk about Camille Pissarro, but they were all showing with the Academy. They were all showing at those Salon shows. They wanted to be there. But they also had Paul Durand-Ruel, who was selling their works to individual clients outside of that structure. But anyway, here we have the image of a young woman looking into a cradle. But this is not supposed to be a picture of a mother and child, which have been made ever since Christian images were allowed to be made in the 4th century. Instead, you have a veil over the child, and your focus is really on this woman. You're looking at her and thinking about her position and her psychology as she looks down at this baby. Is this her baby, or is she merely the nanny and this is her charge? If this is her child, what does she think about her new responsibility? If she is the nanny, what does she think about the distance between this child of means, i.e. a future heir to whatever home she's working for, and her own life, and possibly her own children that exist in the servants' quarters portion of the house? Berthe Morisot, and specifically this work, bring up a lot of really interesting issues about the role of women and the role of painting and art at this time. We're starting to see, and this started with people like Theodore Géricault and with Eugene Delacroix, a social awareness creeping into art practice. These are not meant to be images that allow you a distraction from the real world, but they are actually images of the real world meant to give you a reflection on how that world operates and how you, as a person, participate within that operation. It's a very, very interesting thing, and it's not surprising that that perspective is best indicated in the work of a female artist whose rights are very, very, very limited to the male counterparts that she showed with at the first Impressionist exhibition in 1871. And I want to close with Utagawa Hiroshige, Sudden Shower at Ohashi Bridge at Ataka. This is one of the Japanese woodblock prints that created such a distinct compositional break with the pictorial traditions of Western Europe. Look at the way that this is rendered. You have this diagonal coastline, a diagonal bridge. This really does indicate, to a certain extent, a lot of the things that interested artists specifically like Edgar Degas. These oblique angles, these bizarre picture orientations, a weird way of rendering the information in the image. Hiroshige gives us the bridge right in the foreground, but, the influence is not far off. And I know personally that this picture was widely disseminated in 19th century France. So, that's that. And so in the last 15 seconds of our lecture, I just want to say I hope you enjoyed them. I hope this was illuminating, and next time I'm going to have a script and I'm going to be running through these things really quickly. So watch the Mary Cassatt video. and read chapters 2 and